Hello everyone and welcome back. We're here for episode 5 of Mariners TV. I'm your host Tyson Scott, back with Carly Carmichael. Carly, how are you?
Yeah, really good. How are you?
Yeah, good. We're getting, I guess, closer and closer to the start of both playing and watching football. It's been a busy week. We've got some new attire on.
We do. We're rocking the new Marvin t-shirts. We'll chat a little bit about that later. But yeah,
it has been a busy week, especially for the guy in our shirts.
For Marvin, yes.
Marvin, but huge show. So can you tell us what we've got coming up, Carly?
Yeah, so we're going to kick off by talking to Gabby Blanch, who is the captain of our women's NPL team, and she's also a coach within our academy. So have a chat to her about what's been happening and also the season ahead. We also speak with CEO of Central Coast Football, Darren Sprod, just to talk about the local grassroots football coming back, with New South Wales Football announcing their return to football plan. And then we will be chatting with Daniel Garb and Davutovic just about what's happening with Australian football with A-League and what's to come.
Two blokes who always have their finger on the pulse there in Dave Davutovic and Daniel Garb. So really looking forward to talking to them. We're going to have a chat to them about what they've both been up to. We're going to talk about the Mariners, the A-League, when we can see the ball rolling. But like Carly said, the important thing for everyone, I guess, is playing football. Yes. You must be really keen to have a kick again.
I am. With our team, my girls' team, we're all ready to go and can't wait till we can get onto the ground and start playing again. So it's been way too long.
I'm sure all the physios are going to be very busy when football gets back underway, but one person that hasn't slowed down, I guess, in this crazy situation has been our friend Marvin. Can you tell us a little bit about what Marvin's been up to?
Well, Marvin, first of all, as you can see, he's decided to raise a little bit of money for our Yellow and Navy Foundation, which is a charity branch of the Central Coast Mariners, which raises money to help young footballers in their career and bringing them up so they can actually have a career in football and getting them started. So we've got these shirts, $25. You can purchase them. The pre-order actually does close tomorrow. So you need to get in before 5 o'clock. Head to ccmariners.com.au to put in your order. $25 with an extra $5 shipping. They come in a men's and a ladies cut as well, which is nice. Sizing extra small to 3 extra large. And as I mentioned before, pre-orders close 5 p.m. tomorrow. So completely limited edition. If you do not get one, you will miss out. And apart from that, he has been up to a little bit of Mischief, I think is probably the word to say. We put out a video yesterday, so if you keep watching, we'll have a look.
Let's have a look. Tricks again, I guess.
For the poor security guard.
Yes, but like you said, I guess it's good that he's got his own range of merchandise now. It's even better that all of the funds raised are going to a good cause in the Yellow and Navy Foundation. So make sure you jump online and get yourself a Marvin shirt so you can contribute to a really good cause.
Yes, we've actually got a lot of more orders than we expected. So really, really happy that everyone's gotten behind it and are helping young footballers.
Exactly right. And speaking of young footballers, I guess one woman on the Central Coast who has played a huge role in bringing some great young players through the Mariners is our next guest in Gabby Blanch. She joins us now. So Gabby, thanks for joining us. Football's almost back. How has self-isolation been treating you and the football team?
Thanks for having me, Carly and Tyson. Good to see you again. Self-isolation has been an interesting time, not only as a player but as a coach as well. We've really had to focus on being a little bit creative as opposed to what we're generally used to doing. So it's come with some tough sort of circumstances, obviously, but a huge focus for me in particular with my girls has definitely been keeping them busy and a good focus on their mental health and what sort of things we can be doing to keep them busy and active.
Before going into that training regime, I guess for those of Mariners fans who aren't aware of the women's program, it's been a hugely successful program, especially over the last couple of years. Can you give us or give the fans a bit of a recap to how successful the last couple of years have been in both the junior program and the senior program, in which you're involved in both?
Yeah, look, it's probably since the introduction of our technical director, Dan Barrett, it's definitely changed in terms of the ability that we now have to draw players in, as well as the ability that we have to mentor these girls that come to us. And so we've been able to really strengthen our youth program. Doing so, obviously, throughout the years, it's played a positive effect on our senior program. And now we're starting to really reap the benefits. Whilst our reserve grade team are quite young at the moment, some of them are still sort of 15, 16 years old. Lots of these girls have been in the program for a lot of years. So they understand the expectations that we have in terms of those girls as footballers. And at the same time, we've been able to breed in a number of players to coach these young girls. And I guess the beauty of that is having young girls to be able to see what a senior player looks like and how a senior player behaves at training and on game day and in the lead up to game day is really beneficial for our club.
And so you, as you mentioned, you're also coaching. With everything that's been happening the last couple of months, how have you been keeping your team motivated?
Yeah, look, as I said, it's definitely been a matter of being a little bit creative and thinking outside the box. Initially, Dan, our TD, placed a conditioning program in place for the youth program and the senior players. And to complement that, well, I've just been working with my team in terms of obviously only being able to deliver content online. So I've been using just a private Facebook page, and I have just been delivering some challenges to my team whereby essentially they're asked to beat the coach, and I'm asking them to complete a skill or a particular exercise that does incorporate components such as maximum touches on the ball and ball mastery and all the things that are important that the girls would otherwise be missing out in that training sense. And we did it 2 to 3 times a week just to keep the girls nice and motivated and on the ball. And we found that it was really beneficial for my girls in particular. And then we rolled it out to the younger girls, being the under 14s, and the 15s were already doing it as well. So it's just, as I said, it's been more a matter of keeping the girls busy and giving them a reason to get outside because, as you know, the less that we're doing physically, the more mentally that we're affected. And that was a huge part of what I was seeing when I was chatting with my girls. A lot of the girls were experiencing a time of their life where they've never been isolated to just, sitting on the lounge and not even going to school. And so it really was a matter of coming up with a way that we could continue to get those girls outside and moving and therefore mentally healthy.
There's so many people on the Central Coast that are so keen to get back to football training and playing. Obviously, when you guys get back, there are going to be some social distancing rules. Have you and Dan spoken about how this is going to impact your first few training sessions? And maybe for those at home, that aren't so experienced, can you give us a little bit of an insight as to how you're going to run these first few training sessions, or how you could maybe approach things with the social distancing rules that are in place?
Yeah, absolutely. Dan has been tasked with a huge job, essentially, of keeping in alignment with the restrictions whereby we're only allowed to work with 9 players at a time and the coach. And so I guess we're lucky as youth coaches to have a leader in a technical director that's able to really guide us through how we come back in these first couple of weeks and how we do abide by the restrictions that we're required to abide by. Essentially, what we're looking at doing is a huge focus on plenty of touches on the ball, obviously, and then conditioning. So from what we're envisaging, it's probably not going to be too much longer until we're back playing competition games, from what we understand. And so we need to make sure that the players are ready, not only from a ball perspective, but from a conditioning perspective. So we do plan to sort of come in and ease the players in, being mindful of injuries, but also with a view to ramping up every session and every week that we're there until such time as where we get the go-ahead to play competition games.
And we've got some really good young players coming through the Women's Academy. Are there any names you want to throw out there as some young girls that we should be keeping an eye on?
Oh, put me on the spot. Look, if there are, so many players that come to mind, even if I'm just to think from the youth program perspective, we've got girls that have come and joined us from, teams down in Sydney that have previously played in the NPL1 program as well. So one particular player in my under-17s that comes to mind, Eloise Jones. She joined us only 2 seasons ago from one of those Sydney clubs that were competing in the NPL1, and just a real up-and-comer. She's had a couple of good opportunities to play in reserve grade as well over the last season, which has been really beneficial for her, and I've been working with her just to refine a couple of things within her game that I feel will really benefit her as she moves into that senior, the senior level of football. And then from an even younger perspective, in our under-14s team, we've got young Zoe Henderson, who I've watched closely for the last sort of year or two. And she's really come a long way in terms of her leadership and her ability as a football player. In our under-15s team, we've got a number of girls that are really starting to shine. Olivia, I can't think of Olivia's last name, but she's a young girl that I do think will come through the ranks in the next couple of years and will be a good, strong contender for our grade as we move forward in the next couple of years. But as I said, we've sort of built a really awesome culture within our academy where the expectations on the players are very clear. We have a great group of senior players that the young girls are able to see in real time. We all train right next to each other. We all train one another after each other. So we're right there. They're able to see us. They're able to see the expectations of us on players just as the expectations that we place on them as players. And I think that that's really been so beneficial for our academy in the last probably 3 to 4 years.
Gabby, before we move on to the questions from the fans, we've been inundated with questions from your fans, but we'll get to them in a second. I just wanted to quickly get you to touch on a person that you've mentioned quite a bit throughout this interview, which is Dan Barrett. You were talking about so many young players coming through playing under the Mariners brand, which is fantastic for the Mariners, fantastic for the Central Coast, but I guess for them personally, to have a guy like Dan Barrett who has so many connections across the W League, the young Matildas, that can really, I guess, play an active role in moving these players through the system. You mentioned him being a huge factor of the success of the Mariners. Can you just provide a bit of an insight to how he's changed things and the influence that he has had on the Mariners Academy program?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Dan has played a huge role, not only in the academy, but as I said, in bringing in the right people to lead the academy. His approach is very different to what I've seen with male coaches, I must admit. His approach is not heavy-handed. He's not overbearing. He's not loud, and he doesn't swear, and very different to what I see in our in the opponent's coaching staff, for example. And so I think that Dan's really been able to come in and build a rapport with a lot of the girls where they trust him and they understand that he is there for their best interest, being football and developing as young footballers. And in turn, that's been a real privilege for myself as a young and up-and-coming coach to be able to observe Dan and watch his style and sort of take bits and pieces here and there and implement with my own style. And I think that, I've been involved in the rep program here on the coast for years and years and years, and for Dan to come along and really progress it the way that it has over the last 3 to 4 years, it's just so different. The culture's different, the expectations are different, And the opportunities are there for young girls that do want to come to the academy. Dan does have good contacts in his football network, and I think when he sees a girl that's worthy of going further than perhaps where we are, then he's been open to pushing those girls where they need to be.
Beautiful. And yeah, as Tyson mentioned, we do have quite a few questions that have come through. So we've just picked out some of them. The first one is, I think, the question that everyone always asks. Do you think the Mariners should have a team in the W League?
Yes, I absolutely do. Good question. It is a good question. And I think I get asked this question probably 4 to 5 times a week from different people. I think, it's probably not always been that we've had the depth of women's football on the coast to be able to maybe support it, or the support of the club, potentially, whether it was Mariners or the representative teams that we've had over the years in the coast. But I think now is a great time. We've got the right people in place to lead it. We hopefully will come to a time where we have access to facilities. And I do think that there's a really good chance that the majority of those players that do eventually play W League on the Central Coast can be Central Coast born and bred players. So it's 100% something that I hope for within the next couple of years. And definitely, even when the time comes, I really hope to be involved in some way.
Well, I think we definitely share your passion there, Gabby. We'd love to see a W League team here on the Central Coast. Our next question is more of an individual one for you. What are your individual goals for when the football season resumes?
Well, as a player, obviously to get back to 90 minutes worth of football conditioning, which, being match fit is very different to beach running and running around the block and doing, gym sessions. So I think first and foremost, getting to a level of being able to sustain performance for 90 minutes is first and foremost for me. I think outside of that, probably now realising that, having the ability to go and play football every Tuesday, Thursday, Friday afternoon and game day Sunday, I just will never take it for granted again. Honestly, I think since isolation and not having the access to be able to do that, I say to my girls all the time, I'll never whinge about coaching in the cold again. I'll never whinge about the rain again, because it's been it feels like it's been a long time that we've been off.
Definitely. I think everyone has that you don't know what you got until it's gone feeling about everything happening. And our last question, so how did you actually get into the Mariners women's team, so into the Mariners Academy program?
Look, as I said, I have played representative football on the Central Coast for many, many years. And I did take a little break from it when my children were a little bit younger and when I was focusing on my career a little bit. And I guess when I actually noticed that Ken Shembury had started to take the reins a little bit with the academy, and I was a bit curious, and I did turn up to trials one day and had a good chat with Ken, and from there I started playing there, and from there, like I said, then with the introduction of Dan, it's just we've come leaps and bounds. So through trial processes, obviously, but now I hope to establish myself in more of a coaching and leadership capacity, and hope to build a really solid career there.
Well, Gabby, that concludes the chat. We really, really appreciate you joining us here on the show, and I think I speak on behalf of everyone at the club that it is amazing to have you involved. I've been lucky enough to get to know you over the years, and I think, all of the young football players coming through on the Central Coast are in extremely good hands with yourself, Dan, the staff. So, on behalf of the club, thank you for everything that you do for the club. You do an amazing job, and thanks for joining us today here on the show.
Thanks, Gab.
Great to be here. Thanks so much. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Gab.
Beautiful.
I guess a bit of a theme we've got at the moment, but it's great to see that there are so many women involved in the game at the moment.
Definitely, and the fact that Gab is a mum, she works, she coaches, she plays. I don't know how she finds the time for it. I don't know how she does it, but she seems to be doing it all at a fantastic job of it. And hopefully we do get to see her more involved as we move further. Absolute superwoman, and like I said, it was great to have her, great to get her insights. And during the week, you've had, I guess, a chat with another organisation, social media page that's doing some fantastic things in women's football. Yes, I was lucky enough to go down and have a chat to Rose Valente from the Ladies League. For those who aren't on social media, media too much. The Ladies League, mostly on Twitter and Instagram, they are a bunch of young women who are just so passionate about football, and they just wanted to create a space where they could have female voices heard within it. And I think it's really important because, especially, I know when I first got into the A-League, there wasn't that many other female supporters that I knew. And I wish they were around, 10 years ago. That would have been fantastic. But to see what they've done, they've built a website. They're giving these young women a platform to, write match articles and cover reports. Even doing Instagram Live, giving them opportunities in media, interviewing players. It's just been fantastic. So we had a chat to Rose. She gave us a quick rundown of what the Ladies League is all about. Thank you so much to Rose from the Ladies League for giving us her time to have that chat. So make sure you do jump onto social media and check them out and see what they do.
Yeah, well, before we get on to our next guest, some huge news we've had over the last week or so. So before we get on to talk about what the impacts are locally, I guess, Carly, can you tell our fans a little bit about what we've got coming up in the local football scene based on what Football New South Wales has put out?
Yeah, so Football New South Wales has put out their Level 1 return to training plan. So they've released some resources on their website which give players, coaches and clubs a bit of an idea on what they can expect when they start to return to training, some of the guidelines they need to follow and a few things like that. So we're just going to quickly run through some of them, which you can find on the Football New South Wales website. So the first one, preparing for training. I feel like it's all pretty easy stuff. Making sure you're getting ready at home, shower at home before and after, wash and sanitize your hands. Only arrive 5 minutes before training, try and keep a 1.5 metre distance from others and bring your own water bottle. I feel like that's all very common sense at the moment. And, you know, that's the least we can do. No hanging around before and after training. I know it is quite a sociable thing for a lot of teams, but try and keep it short and sharp, which is going to help us get there sooner. What you can and can't do. So you can do non-contact skill training drills such as passing, shooting and heading, and also 10 participants at a time, including the coach. What you cannot do, there's no contact-to-contact playing skills such as tackling, and there's no spitting, which, let's be honest, we probably shouldn't be doing anyway because that's just a bit gross. It's not really my thing. And then the real obvious one, do not come to training if you don't feel well. So fever, cough, fatigue, sore throat or shortness of breath. If you're feeling unwell, don't risk it, even if it is just a general cold. It's not worth it in case you do pass it on to your fellow teammates, and yeah, it's just not worth it, is it?
No, and I think, there probably will be a few people that'll be a bit short of breath after their first session, but...
Yes, that will be me. And they have released some guidelines as well for clubs, which is just some real basic stuff. So only essential personnel to attend, change rooms not to be open, toilets can be open, but make sure you're using social distancing. Canteens can be open for takeaway items only. Soap and hand sanitizers must always be available in the toilets. No social activities to occur once training is concluded. Making sure you're washing down your surface areas, promoting education around hand washing, provide hand sanitizers again, and also bins, which again, it's all stuff that's pretty common sense. So hopefully we're able to get these in place so we can get training happening sooner.
Exactly right. And I think everyone is super excited to get back out, have a kick. And we're thrilled to be joined by our next guest, who's going to be giving us the ins and outs of what this means for the Central Coast. Darren, Sprod, thank you for joining us. Can you give the viewers a bit of an update as to what our timeline looks like now with these announcements? When can teams get back to training? When can we see games being played again?
Yeah, thanks, Tyson. So we've been obviously working with Central Coast Council to get access to the grounds. So we'll have access to those grounds from Monday, and most of the clubs that use council grounds are coming in now to pick up keys and so forth, and lights have been programmed and they'll all be ready to go from next week. So teams can start training within the guidelines that Carly just mentioned, starting next week. And our aim at this point in time is to try and get competitive football up and running on the weekend of the 4th and 5th of July.
Wow, that'd be fantastic. And so if we're looking at that 4th and 5th of July kickoff date, when would we be looking at a draw? Obviously, that's something that's going to be quite challenging at this moment, but I know everyone's probably got it in the back of their heads. Yeah,
so the challenge for us right now is, well, I said we're aiming for the 4th and 5th of July. So Football New South Wales has applied for an exemption to the public health order. So right now the public health order precludes us from playing competitive football games because of the 1.5 metre social distance part of it. So if that exemption is granted, then we'll be able to start on the 4th and 5th of July. So we're going to start draw production next week, and it takes us about 7 or 8 days to produce a draw for 11,000 games of football across the Central Coast. So the intention would be to have that out in the 3rd week of June, if we get the exemption to the public health order, which we hope to get in the middle of June. And that would then allow us to play football with a league that finishes in mid to late October.
I don't think a lot of people at home would know the amount of challenges that you guys are going through, and I don't envy you at the moment, Darren. I'm sure it's crazy in there at the moment, but I guess could you provide a bit of an insight to the people at home on what some of your biggest challenges have been, whether that's been facilities, whether that's, pouring through the pages and pages of government legislation. How are you, I guess, what are the biggest challenges for CCF to get the league back up and running?
So firstly, I would say the facilities has been the opposite. So Central Coast Council, and sometimes we jump on them, have been fantastic. So they come straight out very early and said we'd let you extend the season. They've actually given us the ability to take the grounds into November if we need to. So they've been really good. It's trying to organise the amount of games that we have into what is going to be the limitations. So if we get the exemption to the public health order, we will still only be allowed to have 500 people at a venue. Now, that's a venue whether you have one field at a venue or whether you have 10 fields at a venue. So to put 500 people at a venue, and that includes mums, dads, players, referees, coaches, everyone, 500 people in a venue, we need to really think about how we generate the fixtures, especially for the younger kids. The younger kids, you imagine you get 5 or 6 little kids games at one field, and then you got mum, dad, grandma, everyone else at the field. That becomes a bit of a challenge for us. So we have to think about the way we generate the fixtures, and it's going to mean that the competition looks a little bit different as far as what you would normally expect for kickoff times and so forth.
And so football is arguably the biggest sport on the Central Coast. What can everyone be doing just to make sure that we're able to kick off the local season in a responsible manner? What would you say to people out there that are waiting to get out into the field?
So the biggest thing is the return to training guidelines. If we, for want of a better word, if we screw that up, and and all of a sudden people start going out in groups of more than 10, and we get complaints everywhere, then we'll never be able to get a league off the ground because they'll shut us down before we get a league off the ground, to be perfectly frank. So I know everyone's keen to get out there and start training and start tackling and all that sort of stuff. But right now, training's open for next week. But if in the first week or two there's 1,000 people on the ground, and we'll get shut down very quickly, right? And we'll never get a league off the ground. So the most important thing is that we follow the guidelines that are set, as best we can. Now we're certainly going to start ramping up education campaigns from the middle of next week on social media and so forth. But we can only educate. The responsibility sits with the individual. And I think all of us, doesn't matter what level of game you're at, you want to get out there and start playing. And we want to get kids and participants out there playing the game. But if we go in this first 4-week period where we're able to train and we can't follow the guidelines that are in place at that point, we'll never get to a league.
Just before we let you go, Darren, I guess one of the biggest problems in this situation has been, so much misinformation flying around. For those people at home wanting to know how to stay updated, what's the best way or the best channel for them to know when they can get back to training, what they can do at training, and how to stay updated generally?
Yeah, so we're going to start to put more stuff out on our social media, on our Facebook page, and they'll get shared on the club's Facebook pages, no doubt. Some of the stuff you read in the media is factually incorrect. For example, last weekend there was a story on both Channel 7 and Channel 9 that said grandparents are banned from games and parents are going to have to wait in the car while they watch their kids play. And that is nowhere in the legislation and nowhere in the guidelines. So just be mindful of what you read on on social media sites and so forth. Football New South Wales has got some great resources. We'll put stuff up on our Facebook page. Next week we'll be putting up the map of the dates that we'll be using for the leagues. It is going to mean that we're going to have to play some games through when we wouldn't normally play, for example, July school holidays and so forth, and potentially the October long weekend. And we understand that's not ideal, but it's not an ideal season either. Otherwise, we'd be playing football now. So some people aren't going to, not be able to make all of their games, but we want to offer everyone a minimum of 14 games of football if we can, so that they can get some value for their registration dollar, and that we can all get back to essentially playing the game we love and put what's been a horrendous year behind us if we possibly can.
Well, Darren, we know it's been an incredibly busy time at CCF for you and your staff. We just wanted to, on behalf of the Mariners, say a huge thank you for everything that you guys are doing to get football back up and running. We talk about it every week. Everyone talks about it every day. We just want to be back playing football, and without you guys, that wouldn't be possible. So thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us. And yeah, we'll make sure that everyone stays tuned to the CCF social channels.
Thanks, Tyson. Thanks, Carly.
Thank
Cheers.
you so much. And from what I do know, there are a couple of clubs that are still have opportunities for players to join them. So if you have been holding off, thinking, I'm not quite sure if the season's going to go ahead, make sure that you jump on to your local club's website, have a look, because I think registrations close on Sunday afternoon. So just double check, but yeah, there's still time to register if you're interested.
And volunteers as well. There's so many regulations and guidelines that these local clubs have to follow. They can never get enough people helping them out. So if you want to get down to your local club, if you can't play, lend them a hand. Get down there. They can do with a hand. So yeah, make sure you jump on the CCF website to stay updated. And if you can get involved and help, do your best to do that. We're going to move on now to our friends from Mate. And again, it wouldn't be a Mariners TV episode without our man Dan getting a mention. So I think he's been up to something during the week. I don't know, what's he been up to?
So last fortnight we announced the winner of our Mate competition, who won the Xbox. So Dan went out and delivered them to those two lucky winners, and we'll see how he went.
Hey guys, we're just heading off to Gabriella and Nick's house at the moment. We're just dropping off the Xboxes for the Mate competition. Nick's been the winner and been nominated by his sister Gabrielle, so we're just going to go there now and drop it off and make their day. Just here arriving at Nick's house, I'm going to drop off the two Xboxes now, so we can't wait to give them the two games as well. So they're each one an Xbox One S, the 1 terabyte hard drive, so there'll be plenty of gaming to do with this. So fantastic, so here we go. Hey mate, how are you? Nick?
Hey, yes.
Nice to meet you, Nick. I'm Dan. Nice to meet you, champion. Congratulations, bud. Got two fantastic prizes for you today. Hi Gabrielle, how are you? Come on out. How are you doing? Top one's yours, mate. All right.
Okay, thank you very much.
Second one's yours, lovely. And
Oh,
I'll just
really?
grab the games for you as well. All right, guys, I'll just grab the other one. I've done another one for you, mate. Okay, and this one doesn't get handed out to anybody. This is for you to enjoy, mate. All right, so some bog roll there to wipe your own backside, nice and good. All right, some eggs as well, legend, some wine, and some also master food hampers and stuff.
Thank you.
And also as well,
a big Barrett. Yep.
you've got there's two games each as well for you guys as well, so that's all from Mate. So don't us thank Mate, absolutely tremendous. So there's no dramas.
Thanks.
I hear you're half Greek and half Irish. How do you feel about the World Cup?
Mate, don't talk about the World Cup. You know why the Greeks can't win a World Cup?
Don't know.
Every time a corner comes up, they open up a fish and chip shop.
Hi guys, we just dropped off the two Xboxes. Make sure you jump online to letsbemates.com.au and type in the promo code CCM to get benefits. Have a great day guys, and see you again.
Dan up to his old tricks again.
And a big congratulations once again to Nick and Gabrielle who won those Xboxes. Absolutely fantastic to see. We had so many wonderful nominations and it was really nice and heartwarming to see all these beautiful messages that have come through about their friends and family that they wanted to do. So, and again, a big thank you to Mate. We wouldn't have been able to do it without them. So really, really appreciate that. Actually, I think we mentioned last week, Nick, who was the person who got nominated, he actually had a PlayStation and he gave it away to a single mum with some kids because they couldn't afford one. So it was nice that we were able to give him something back in return.
Yeah, it's good to see that so many of our members and our fans out there are doing so much to help the people in their community, because at a time like this, I guess everyone could do with that extra bit of support. Does Dan ever go home or does he just drive around every day?
I think he just drives around. But we'll just quickly touch base back on the return to training guidelines. Mm-hmm. So just as I mentioned, we did mention before, Football New South Wales have a whole bunch of resources out that you can download. So I think we might pop the link as well into the comments of this Facebook feed. So it's got all the really good things in there. It's even got examples of training drills that you can do, and then also really clear guidelines, checklists for your club. So when you do have your volunteers out and about, there's something really nice and easy that they can just go through and say, yep, we've done all that, we're good to go. And then obviously other resources like posters and other things that you can actually put around your clubhouse. You can email out to your local players. If you've got, I know our local, like our girls team, we've got a Facebook group. It'd be really handy to make sure that you're distributing it, putting it out there. So I think we all need to take a bit of responsibility, as Darren mentioned, to make sure that we're doing the right thing, because I don't think you want to be that person that causes the season to get cancelled. I know I wouldn't want to be, so don't be that person. And so footballnewsouthwales.com.au is where you'll find all of those resources. And as Darren mentioned as well, Central Coast Football will be putting up some resources on their site and socials as well.
Yeah, and I guess before we get on to our next guest, we're about to chat with Daniel Garb and Dave Davutovic about the A-League, what's going to be happening, what's going to happen with Australian football. But before we get on to, Australian football, going back to what we were talking to Sprody about when it comes to local football, you must be absolutely buzzing to get out there and have a kick. What do you miss most about the football season?
For me, it's probably more the social aspect. Mm-hmm. I'm really, really fortunate to play with a group of really amazing women, and I think, we're so different. You look at us and, some of us are mums, some of us, are still at uni, and some of them could probably be my daughters. And so, but the fact that, you get together, you get to training, you have a kick around, and none of that matters. And, last season we probably didn't have the most successful season in the world, but we had fun every single time. And even those wins that we did get, we celebrated and, really enjoyed it. So I don't know if you're going to be playing this year due to travels and things like that. But
yeah, I need to get in soon because by the sounds of things, registration closes on Sunday. So if
the Wombats are after you as well.
Yeah, look, if I don't play, I might send in my stunt double in Dave Jordan.
Yes.
I think I've seen him running about 25 kilometres a day, so I reckon he'd be a pretty handy substitution if I don't
know about his actual football skills, but he can run.
Well, going on to from local football now to Australian football, we're really pleased to be joined by two blokes who have always had their finger on the pulse of Australian football, in Dan Garb and Dave Davutovic. We're going to chat about all things Australian football, the A-League. There's obviously been quite a bit of news in the media. Firstly, thanks for joining us, gents. Dave, we'll start with you. You've been quite busy of late. You've been involved with Okay, just while we get our hosts, our next guests in, I think we're getting them to connect now. But Carly, it has been a very busy week in the Australian football circles.
It has.
You must be keen to get back to Central Coast Stadium or any stadium for that matter.
Yeah, any stadium will do at this stage.
Yeah.
So we're getting so much closer to, hearing that, players can return to training and can start getting some games underway. So fingers crossed it's not too far away.
Well, we've got two guys from those Australian media circles, two guys, like I said, that always have their finger on the pulse of Australian football in Dan Garb and Dave Davutovic. Firstly, thanks for joining us, gents. Dave, we'll start with you. It's been a busy few weeks for yourself. You've been obviously involved in Optus Sports Football Belongs series and a new initiative in Ticker as well. Can you tell us a little bit about both of those initiatives that you've been involved in over not only the past few weeks but for quite some time now?
Yeah, great to be with you and congratulations on your initiative. As you can see, I'm in the Ticker studio at the moment, so a little shameless self-promotion. But look, it's... I guess we'll start off on Ticker. We've started Ticker Sport on Ticker TV, which is a new digital network which started in August and was the brainchild of Aaron Young, the former Sky News Melbourne bureau chief. And we're on each Friday, 11 a.m. to noon, talking about the business of sport. It's not purely football. We're talking all sports, but obviously football gets a pretty solid mention. And obviously the Optus Sports Original Series Football Belongs, as you mentioned, I've been involved in the production, which has been fantastic, been great working for Optus on that project, and really enjoyable. So that's obviously charting and celebrating the history of European football in Australia. And it's a really topical time at the moment because there's so much discussion about, acknowledging the game's past and, using that as a springboard to the future with, A-League expansion, second division, etc. So, both thoroughly enjoyable projects.
Well, Dave, we look forward to checking out, I guess, both of those. But before we get into, I guess, the nuts and bolts of the A-League season, Garby, we'll go to you now. You've also been very busy. You've been speaking to a man that's, I guess, close to all of our hearts to kick off your podcast in Mila Jedinak. Can you tell us a little bit more about the podcast you've started and the couple of guests you've had on to kick it off? Because there's been some big names.
Yeah, for sure, Tyson, Carly, thanks for having me on. Loving your set there, and considering Dave is doing a plug, here's my plug as well. There it is. There's the new podcast. Garby. And that is the Mila Jedinak episode. So Mariners fans, make sure you are on all your podcast networks, subscribe and have a listen to Mila, of course, the once mighty Mariner. Yeah, and it was great to talk with him, especially from a Mariners point of view, because I think it's one of the great Australian football stories. When you think about the fact that he basically paid for his own trial in the A-League with Central Coast. He wasn't actually giving them money, but he trialled for no fee and, busted really hard just to get a spot in a pre-season game. I know there were a couple of people at the Mariners who weren't too sure about him and probably thought, no, we're not going to sign him. But Laurie McKenna pushed through, gave him that chance. And 5 years later, he's captaining a team in an FA Cup final in the UK, captaining a Premier League side, captaining the Socceroos at 2 World Cups. And if it wasn't for the Mariners giving him that chance, it wouldn't have happened. So just an amazing tale how it all came together, and he talks about that in great detail. So no doubt Central Coast fans will enjoy recounting those stories.
We look forward to tuning in. He's obviously a huge fan favourite of the Mariners. But we'll get into the A-League nuts and bolts now. Dave, we'll go to you first. I guess this week we've heard kick-off dates, we've heard plans for grand finals, we've heard CBA negotiations. What are you hearing on the ground? What can you tell A-League fans about where the A-League's at and when we might be able to see football back again?
Yeah, I'd love to have a bit more meat on the bone, but there's not a lot of detail at the moment. I mean, they certainly have penciled in dates, June 15 for potential return to training, mid-July for a return to the pitch with a view to ending the season sometime in August. They're talking about the hub scenario. But, yeah, there's still plenty of detail to work through until, that's effectively worked out. Then the clubs have got to go back and obviously work out contracts and other bits and pieces with their players because, obviously every club's in a very different situation. But I guess, the NRL's back tonight. The AFL will be back in a few weeks. What everyone is longing for is a return to live sport. I guess because the A-League season is so close to the finish line, I expect it to be finished, but there's still a fair bit of negotiation to be had.
Well, Garby, I guess you're a man who's covered the highs and lows of Australian football. What are you hearing? And I guess, how do you see, if you were to, I guess, look into your crystal ball, how does the future look for the A-League, for Australian football, given where we're at the moment?
It's uncertain, let's be honest. I mean, there's no dressing it up, unfortunately. It's a really uncertain time because, as has been widely reported, there is a bit of a feud between the chief broadcaster in the league right now. They're trying to negotiate down the fee as to how much they pay for the rights, and the competition's got a big decision to make as to whether they go ahead with that and what the terms of that agreement are. I agree. I think it'll be finalised, and I think they will complete the season. But what it means moving forward is obviously one that's a little bit scary for people involved and clubs involved and the players most certainly, and the fans who just want to see the teams and the game that we love so much back as soon as possible, because the league could decide to go down its own path potentially when it comes to the broadcasting of the game, which would be an incredibly bold move and one that would leave them in potentially a precarious financial position, but maybe something that is more beneficial long term. But that's a move that, would put the game, definitely in a situation of potential fear as to what will happen moving forward. So it's an uncertain time, it is. But I'll say this, while there may be some fears around the professional game and working through it, the game as a whole will always survive. We've been through worse in Australian football. We'll get through this and come out the other side.
Absolutely. And I guess, Garby, you mentioned the broadcaster. Dave, you mentioned before, OTT platforms. Obviously, you've been involved with Optus. You're about to take off on the venture with Ticker. One of the scenarios that's been thrown around, I guess, is that Garby mentioned was, the A-League, I guess, taking things into their own hands and venturing down that digital OTT broadcast. Could this be a feasible option? I assume it's going to be something you're going to be talking about on Ticker, but I guess what are your thoughts, having now sort of seen what Optus have done with the World Cup, what leagues are doing with OTT platforms? I guess, how do you see the future, and could this be a feasible option for the A-League?
I don't think anything's off the table at the moment, Tyson. I think the FFA need to look at every single option. That's where I think the A-League has historically looked too much at the other sports in Australia. I think they need to be more global in their view of the world and how the game could be run. And you mentioned some of those OTT scenarios. I mean, the Japanese J-League is a fantastic example with the Zone, investing heavily, signing a 10-year contract. And they definitely paid overs, but they invested in the game, and it is an OTT platform. Looking at, I guess, what Optus has done and the success they've had with, the Premier League, the Champions League, etc. I mean, they're up over 800,000 subscribers, I'm led to believe. So, it's a pretty significant pool of people and football followers. Remember, football is the only sport in the Optus Sports stable. So I think the FFA would be, I guess, silly to dismiss that as an option. I don't think they have. But, I guess traditionally we've looked at, free-to-air broadcasting, that traditional model. But certainly if you look at the demographics of, the Central Coast Mariners fans and, broadly A-League fans, it is a younger demographic, very much geared towards, digital viewership.
Well, there's no doubt that digital offering is the future. You guys have both mentioned the other codes. Garby, I'll go to you now. How important do you think, we see the NRL kick off tonight, AFL next week, how important do you think it is for A-League fans, for players, for clubs to just name a date, crack on with it and make a decision and get going?
It is important, of course it is, but I can understand why the league is trying to just bide their time and get this right, because there's a far bigger issue at play than just resuming, and that is the negotiation of this broadcast deal. The A-League's in a different space. We also have the luxury of finishing off the season, potentially having 2 weeks to 3 weeks, maybe a month off, and then going again with the next one. So they can afford to do that. But there's just a far bigger issue at hand, and that is the future of the game financially, or the A-League financially, of which so much of that is down to the broadcast rights, and they've got to make sure that they make the right decision. It's not just about ensuring the money comes from Fox Sports. It's about deciding whether it's the right way to go moving forward too, because it's the future of the game that is at stake here. I still think they need to go down that path and make sure that their money is coming in, or else they're putting themselves in a tricky situation. But you can understand why they haven't quite committed just yet, even though, of course, we want some sort of clarity and we don't want to be left too far behind in terms of a plan, because the players, you feel sorry for them. Andrew Durante this morning has voiced his displeasure at the way it's all being handled. I mean, it's so hard for players and for clubs and people who work at clubs like yourself to know what the actual future is for the organisation.
Well, just lastly, I guess I'll get your thoughts on that point exactly. Dave, we'll start with you. I guess one of the biggest stakeholders is the playing group. We obviously have read the news about CBA negotiations and things needing to happen to get the game underway. Do you have any news as to sort of where that's at? Will a deal get done? And sort of, Garby mentioned that, that there have been some points that, have maybe dragged on. What are you hearing from, I guess, the playing side of things, and are we going to see a ball kicked anytime soon?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the players and their contracts, CBAs, whatever, they need to work out the return date first and foremost, and then everything else can be sorted out from there. As Garby just alluded to, the players I've spoken to are just hugely frustrated at the situation. Some are more frustrated than others. But yeah, there is definitely a desire from the players to return to the pitch. They absolutely want to return to the pitch. The fact that we're seeing the NRL, the AFL and leagues around the world where there have been far more, COVID-19 deaths than we've had in Australia. seems to indicate that, it's not really a health and safety issue now as much as, perhaps an economic issue. But I just really think this is a great opportunity for the game to reset. We had that expansion process a couple of years ago. I'm not sure the game got it right. There was about $100 million on the table there that was knocked back from the game. Perhaps this could be an opportunity to go back and revisit some of those clubs. The NPL clubs, there's a lot of those clubs and former NSL clubs who have expressed a desire to be part of, the professional landscape here in Australia, be it the A-League or the second division. So, look, I think it's it's a massive challenge for the game, again, as Garby said, but it could be a great opportunity to reset and really springboard moving forward. And there's no doubt that football, the A-League, is going to have to take a haircut on the TV deal. But I think they really need to use it as an opportunity, a step backwards, to take a few steps forward and just build the overall, foundations and the asset base of the league as a whole.
And Garby, to finish up, I guess, what are you hearing from the playing group? And maybe as well, just if you wanted to provide a bit of an update, you covered the Premier League, obviously, for years. We've seen some movement there over the last sort of 24 to 48 hours. What could we see from the Premier League circles as well, and what are you seeing there?
Yeah, I mean, they're trying to push ahead massively. I mean, the testing has been done pretty vigorously, and the numbers are really low when you consider how many cases there are in the UK. The number of Premier League players that are affected are really low, and it doesn't seem like that's going to dissuade them at all. I mean, it sums up how precarious our financial situation is when you've got a league like the Premier League trying to ensure that they push through as well, so they get their broadcast money, because it doesn't just affect the Premier League clubs. That goes all the way down the football chain. The lower league clubs, which aren't continuing their leagues, they need that money coming through as well in order to survive. So it's hugely important that they finish their season as well. Firstly, for fairness, and hopefully Liverpool can win the title and Leeds can get promoted and West Brom can get promoted. All these things can happen from a fairness point of view, but financially it is just critical. And it's the same here in Australia. But, as Dave said, we've got a chance here to assess just where we want to be in 5 years' time, what's best for the game, can we use this as a way to set up a second division potentially, all these different things. There is an opportunity there, but none of that happens without money. And I think they've got to ensure they get this financial deal right with the broadcaster and then go from there. So, yeah, I mean, it's exciting that things are happening again, and hopefully it's going to be kicking off soon in Australia as well.
Well, there's no more fitting way to finish than, I guess, a Liverpool fan having a rant about Liverpool. We should have expected that. Garby, Dave, thanks for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you both on Ticker and your podcast, Garby. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Good to see you, Garby.
You too, Davo. All the best, mate. Looking good.
Great to hear from, I guess, two people that, know the ins and outs of Australian football.
Yeah, definitely fantastic. And great to see they're doing some really, really good things to keep up that football talk, podcasts and live streams and all of that. So much like we're doing, just to keep some football chatter going until we actually get to kick a ball.
Absolutely. Well, we've spoken about local football, we've spoken about the A-League, we've spoken about the Premier League. Are we finished, or is there anything else we've got to cover before we go?
I think we're good.
We done? You want to check your sheet?
I think, no. Yeah, no, we're done.
We're good?
Yep, and I think we're on time as well, which is a first.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, guys. We hope you enjoyed the show. Like Carly said, last fortnight. If there's anything or anyone you want us to get on the show, feel free to get in contact and let us know. But thanks for tuning in again. Thanks for having me.
And don't forget, you've got about 24 hours to get your Marvin t-shirt. So these ones right here, ccmariners.com.au. You'll find it on the homepage. Otherwise, just go to our social media. We've been blasting it all over there.
See you in 2 weeks.
Thank you so much. See ya.
Contribute to a good cause. Get a shirt. See you guys.
See ya.